Have you ever had the fear, or maybe you've had the experience of being on stage and you're trying to engage with an audience, and what do? They give you the dreaded look, right? You hold the mic out to them and they give you this. Nobody likes that, right? That's a terrible feeling. But what if you could borrow strategies from the greatest lead singers of all time and use them in your shows and get way more engagement with your audience? See, a lot of people think, oh, I can't do things the way that the big acts do it because I don't have the following that they do. I don't have the authority that they do, or the music catalog to do that. Well, here's what I'll say. Music gets people through the door into a show, but if your performance does not hold up and carry that music along with it, they will not be back for another performance. And this is true even of major artists. How many of y'all, I know I've had experiences where I go to a concert and I'm out there and I'm like, I paid money. I thought the music got me in the door, but what's going on here, right? So you have to have a solid performance. And the artists who have figured out that once they get the fans in through the door, if they can use a certain group of techniques, they can get an audience engaged with what they're doing no matter what, right? I've seen opening acts do this to win over crowds. I've seen headlining acts do it to command an audience even more. It's universally usable by anybody watching this video. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you probably the 3 main concepts that you need to know so that you can go out to your next gig and start to command the stage like a pro, using the same techniques that professionals are using. And if you're wondering, by the way, how do you know if professionals are using this? A couple of things. I've been on 700 plus shows across the United States. I've toured with big major acts like Seven Dust Nothing More, Tremonti, and big rock bands like that. And so one of the points that I always try to make, if I can possibly do it on every single tour I've been out with, is find the lead singer, ask them questions about like, so how do you command an audience? Well, like, what are some of your stage tips to help really get someone engaged? And one great piece of advice I heard was, you don't let the audience set the pace. You set the pace. That actually came from a guy named Scotty Austin. And I thought that was a great piece of advice because there are so many artists who go out there and let the audience determine how they're going to perform. It's almost like this, well, if the audience isn't giving me anything, then I'm not going to give them anything. And we get defensive, and then it just kills the whole performance. Where what Scotty was talking about is you need to go out there and you need to command the stage from the get-go, right? So I want to jump into sort of a few different ways that you can utilize some of these tactics that I've learned over the years that have helped really make every audience we perform in front of really easy to get engaged with what we're doing. Our singer does some of this stuff as well, and it's very, very effective, especially also for your merchandise sales. We'll talk about that a little bit towards the end of the episode today. So what do we need to know first and foremost whenever we're trying to command an audience like a professional? Well, the first thing I think that's more important probably than anything else when I think about it is the charisma. Because I could tell you the right phrases and techniques that the pros use, but if you say it like, how's everybody doing? You do that kind of basic monotone thing, no one's going to really be engaged. So the first thing we need to really address is, how do we improve our charisma? How do we improve our stage showmanship, as we call it? Well, there's a few things that we need to understand. First, body language. People, and just in general conversation in day-to-day life, most of our communication with them is nonverbal, right? I think it's like 97%. So if you think about it, most of the way that you're going to be communicating with your audience is how you're carrying yourself. So if you're on stage and you're like this, if you're very closed up, that's resonating insecurity to the audience. So what you need to make sure is that you're wide open, right? You've got the microphone, or if you got the guitar or the drums. Drums, you don't have a choice, right? Unless you're here, you're going to be closed off, right? But for the most part, you need to keep this part of your body open and facing the audience, because that projects confidence, right? So one of the first things we need to do is figure out, okay, am I doing things with my body that are hurting the ultimate goal that I'm trying to reach? God, my clients are all messaging me right now. So we need to figure out, how do I actually present myself that way? So that's first and foremost. Sometimes things that can help with your body language is how you dress. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you a very small example of what I do. One of the first things I started doing to get into quote-unquote character when I would go on stage is I would take my shoes off. So some of you, if you've ever seen me live, know that I do not perform with shoes on. And I have to check the stage for projectiles and things that are going to stab into my feet if I'm not careful, holes in the stage and things of that nature. But the beautiful thing that I get to do is whenever I'm about to go into the performance, I take my shoes off, and that's always kind of like a moment of transformation for me, where now I can get a little bit more play-like, a little bit more childlike and free with myself, not to be so like, okay, I'm reserved and whatever. I'm just trying to be like confident dude with the guitar having a good time. And so sometimes even the way that you dress can be a part of that sort of transformation. We've started to get things like, fancier, funnier, more eye-grabby things, attire that we can wear on stage. And that just helps kind of create that mental process before you go out on stage where you're sort of like, all right, I'm about to become another person, essentially. And it's not that you're becoming another person, you're just becoming an exaggerated version of yourself, right? Think about professional wrestlers. What do? They take their personalities and they crank it up to 10. That's what you're fundamentally going to do whenever you walk out onto that stage, right? So have a moment of transformation to get your body language and your posture and your face and all that kind of stuff right, because that's how you're going to be communicating with them. How your body's, organized, whether you're like this, or your face too. If your face is kind of unsure and uncertain, you're going to project that to the audience. But if you've got confidence that no matter what, even if you get one of those things where you're like, how you guys doing out there? And you don't really hear very much, it doesn't even faze you. You take that silence as that they had some bar food in their mouth, or they were taking a drink and they said yes, but you couldn't really see it because it was quiet and it's like whatever, but they said it, right? And then the people who didn't say anything, those people nudged him and was like, come on, man, I was taking a drink. I know I'm going over the top with it, but that's sort of the mindset that you need to have, that sort of confidence and authority that you have, that if they don't respond, that's not because, I stink and I'm not doing a good performance and they don't like my music and all that kind of stuff. I'm killing it. I'm doing great. You just got to have that sort of overconfidence. I don't want to say arrogance, because you don't want to have arrogance, because that's a negative thing that if people look at you and like, God, they're arrogant. Unless it's funny and part of a shtick, not going to work very well. The next thing is tonality. That is like such a big part of the game, where a very basic thing that a lot of singers will say is like, you guys having a good time out there tonight? That kind of thing. They'll ask a question. And I think that's great. Asking questions is fundamentally, a way to get people to engage. But if you ask it like, you guys having a good time out there tonight? You can hear the nervousness in what they're doing. It's not going to translate very well. You have to have the right approach to it and the sort of assertiveness. You have to give yourself the authority to be that kind of assertive and command a crowd. I know a lot of people are like waiting for the crowd to give them permission to take them into the show, when really what you have to do is you have to set the pace. You have to go out there and just claim that I am the authority. I'm the one with the microphone and on the stage, and you're not. So I'm going to direct this show the next 45 minutes, the next 30 minutes, 25 minutes, an hour, however long you got. You're basically going to say, like, for the next duration, I'm the captain of the ship. Look at me. I am the captain. That's what you need to do to the audience, fundamentally. And have that sort of confidence. And when you have that, you're going to hear it in your tonality, right? And your tonality is what reinforces that. Like if I say, yeah, put your hands together. Notice how it sounds like I'm asking a question. Put your hands together, maybe, possibly, anybody? Spiraling, I'm spiraling. That's what happens when you do that. You need to have the, put your hands in the air right now. Let me see all your hands, right? You need to say it, look at people. Don't call them out, but like sort of kind of look at them. Be like, put your hands in the air. Yeah, let's do it. Give them that little moment of like, I see you not participating. And people will feel that pressure a little bit, and they'll start to kind of cooperate a little bit if they're a little stiff. You got one of those stiff audiences. Sometimes people are just attentive, by the way. Keep that in mind. Sometimes you will have audiences that are just like, they're not giving you that look, but they're giving you like they're just watching you, like they're nodding their head and they're like, yes. Bobbing heads is a good sign. If they're just locked, frowning, looking at you, bad sign. But if they're like locked, they don't look like they're very happy, but they're going like this, that's a good sign. The attentive watchers, that's how they indicate approval, is they sit there and nod their head. They're not the people that are like, where's the mosh pit? They're just the people that are watching like, this isn't enjoyable. This is entertaining. I am enjoying this. That's sort of how guilty I consume concerts like that, because I'm analyzing everything and enjoying like, oh my God, this is so cool. They're doing the thing. Oh my, my brain's going 1,000 miles an hour, analyzing everything. And on the surface, it looks like I hate everything I'm seeing, but that's just because I have a eyebrow bone that sticks out a little bit. So I got what they call hood. It just makes me look angry all the time. I'm not angry. I got hood, y'all. I'm from South Side OKC. We got hood. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, the next part of your charisma is, we've talked about body language, we talked about tonality, but now you need to actually use that to give them some commands. So that actually kind of leads me into the next thing that we need to talk about, which is, what are the commands that these singers have used to really get people engaged? So there's a set number of them. I've actually documented, I think, 17 of them all in total that singers are using to get people sort of entranced in what they're doing. The first kind of group of commands I want to talk about, I'm just going to talk, I could go for a few hours on this, but the best ones that I'll pull for you guys is, first of all, we have covert commands. Okay, what is a covert command? This is really fun. This is where you're not really giving someone a directive. You're not like, do this, but you're kind of being suggestive with it. That's the way that I like to think about it. For example, we have tactics that we can use that I've seen singers use, like embedded commands, right? And so they'll say things like, when you pick something up at the merch table later, right? Notice that when you pick something up at the merch table, they will kind of like, they'll pop that P like a birthday balloon and really emphasize, pick up something from the merch table, a lot of space, then they'll start talking about other things. But it was just like a little embedded thing that they threw in there. And then there's also a secondary element too that we could talk about when it comes to covert. Goodness gracious, guys, quit texting me. What happens is we could go into presuppositions. So what is a that sounds so fancy, presupposition. It sounds like we're in English class. No, it's nothing of the sort. All it means is you're being assumptive. You're assuming, right? And I know what they say about assuming, that you will be an ass and an ump will shun you. But no, I'm just kidding. That's a Fresh Prince reference for those of you that got that. I know what they say about assuming, but really what you're doing is, in sales, we call this assumptive closing, where you're just assuming they're going to take the action you're telling them to do anyway, right? So when you say that last sentence that I said, so when you pick up something from the merch, I didn't say you are going to pick something up. That would be a very direct command, right? There's no presupposing. That's just telling people. But if I say, when you, implying that at some point they will, pick something up at the merch table. Now that's the command part, right? So you can see how there was a presupposition built into that. I sound so fancy when I say that, presupposition. But, and you can too now. Okay, so you can look at those things in many different ways. How can I throw in? So I'm not sure of all the ways, this is a good one. I'm not sure of all the ways that you're going to find a way to remember something tonight. Or, excuse me, I'm not sure of all the different ways that you're going to find a piece to remember this night by. Like, that could mean many things. That could just mean like, wow, I'm going to see a moment on stage that I'm going to remember forever. But also there was a subtle assumption there that one of the ways that you could do that is, take a piece of it home with you. Take a piece of it home with you sort of implies that there is something physical you could take home. What on earth could be the physical things that you take home? Merchandise, things like that. So it's a little subtle presupposition. I know a lot of singers like these because they don't like being very commanding, I guess, or they don't want to seem bossy, I guess is the word, right? They don't want to seem very like, I'm just telling everyone what to do, because guess what happens when you just come right out and just do the overt commands, which is what we'll talk about next. When you start doing overt commands, if you haven't built the charisma to really attract people, and you haven't done these little covert commands to really bring people in, then it's a lot harder just to go straight cold to a direct command. People are going to have a lot of resistance. And guess what happens? When they resist, no one moves. And when no one moves, you look at them and you go, and then it just shoots the whole thing to the ground. So I think it's really important to actually kind of follow a chain link of sequences where you're going from, all right, I've got my charisma background, I've got all that stuff handled, so I'm going to share everything with the best body language and tonality possible. Then I'm going to do some covert commands, right? Man, this is such a good crowd here tonight. I'm not sure all the ways that you guys are going to have an amazing time, but when you do, will you let me know? Let me hear you say, yeah. Notice I chained from a covert command into an overt command. I went from, I'm not sure of all the ways that you're going to have a great time tonight, but when you do, I want you to let me know. Okay, so then it's like, and then when do? I immediately make them let me know right after I say that. I said, let me hear you say, yeah, yeah. That's their way of indicating that they're having a good time. You see how I kind of chained them into that? So it's a little logical chain of commands that you go boom, boom, boom into. So another example, now that we can talk a little bit more about overt commands, I don't know if you heard my son screaming in the background. Everybody's trying to just, interrupt this video. I will not let it happen. Number 3, we have overt commands. So these can be done like I've done a billion of these, and so have you probably, where it's like, put your hands in the air. Let me hear you say yes. Those are direct commands. Now, what I like to do, couple things. One, there's one called trial closing. Trial closing is a technique that singers use all the time, and I've actually seen it used in lots of public speaking as well, which is to get an audience engaged in what you're doing, you want their heads, like I said, to be bobbing, right? Now, how do you get someone's head to start doing this other than to the beat of the song? In between the songs, how do you get people's heads to stay on this momentum of, yeah, yeah? Well, it's very easy. When you think about it, you ask them questions that logically end in yes. So, for example, you're in front of a bunch of people. Who came out here to have a good time tonight? If they don't say yeah, what are they doing there? Of course, everyone who came out there came out to have a good time. I didn't come out to have a bad time. But if you say it with the right charisma and like authority and like, I'm grabbing you in, we're pulling you into this show. Who came out, who came out tonight to have a great time? Let me hear you say, yeah. Boom. Now you're driving people and we're there thinking like, oh yeah, I came out here to have a good time. Woo, yeah, woo. All that kind of great stuff, right? So trial closing is a very easy one to implement. So you just think of what are questions that will naturally end in them saying yeah. And what you can do is you can let the audience naturally respond with a yeah, or you could do what I've been doing is go straight into a direct command right after it. So one great example is called an if-then command. If blah, 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 if X, then Y, and the Y is command. So it's if X, then command. So if you guys are having a good time tonight, then let me hear you say yeah. Very, very easy sequence. If you guys have enjoyed the show so far, then come over to the merch table after the show, come take a picture, say hi. Notice how in that one too, you don't say, if you had a good time tonight, then go over to the merch table, buy a bunch of stuff, we'll love you for it. You say, if you had a good time tonight, then go by the merch table, and we'll take a picture with you and we'll hang out. Right? Because if you're independent DIY, of course, you've got to be hanging out at your merch table after a gig, like as soon as possible. By the way, some people don't do this. Have the singer, because God knows they've got a ton of equipment, have them put their little mic stand to the side and then run to the merch table. Have them immediately command the merch table. If you don't have someone at the merch table throughout the set and it's just all the members of the band by themselves, you got to get someone over to that merch table as soon as the set's done. Capitalize, strike while the iron's hot, because that heat will go away as the night goes on. So you really got to make sure you take advantage of that. So notice you're saying go over to the merch table, go by the merch table, because we're going to take a photo and we're going to hang out, right? So you're not saying the reason they should go over there is to buy things. That would cause resistance. You say the reason you should go over there is because one of the benefits of coming over to the merch table after the show is you get to actually meet us and you get to take pictures with us and we'll sign things for you. Now, sign things could mean I'll sign the shirt off your back. Signing things could mean I sign the poster that we have for sale. Maybe you don't have something to sign and so you decide to buy something at the merch table as an impulse so that you have something so that I can sign. Right? All that is sort of implied through what we're doing, right? So If-then commands are very powerful, but notice I try to go through a direct command where it's like, if you're having a good time, then let me hear you say yeah. And then sometimes they'll just go, yeah, right? So, but sometimes you'll have to say, put your hands in the air, or, hey, let me hear you say yeah. Sometimes it's not an if, then let me hear you say yeah. You're just saying, let me hear you say yeah. That's a direct command. Hey, go over to the merch table after the show. Go buy the merch table. That's a direct command. Anytime you're telling someone what to do, telling someone to go stream you on Spotify is also a direct command. It's just a really, really weak one. I didn't want to say bad. It's a really weak one. When you think about it, you could have a lot stronger call to actions where it's like, if you want, we've got a QR code at the merch table. If you want to stream our music, if you want to go follow us on streaming platforms, go scan that QR code at the merch table. You notice how that has a little bit more impact for you and a little bit better situation than just them going, yeah, I hope I remembered to do that 4 more bands later. Because guess what? They won't. They may tomorrow when they're like, oh, I want to look up that song from that first band. But if you get, while the iron's hot, you get them to go over there, sign up for your email list, sign up for all that stuff. Now you got them in multiple ways than just getting a couple streams, right? Now you're actually getting tangible benefit for your business. And so hopefully you guys have enjoyed this so far. I could go for hours and hours, but I'll stop there. What I have actually available, if you want to keep learning more stuff like this, the stuff is kind of interesting to you, I've got a link in the description where you can pick up all 17 tactics. I call it crowd control because obviously you're commanding the crowd, you're controlling the crowd through the use of these same techniques that I've studied, not only from the singers who I've been working with when I tour, but also the great singers throughout time when I've studied their performances with this knowledge, knowing about these techniques and saying, oh my God, they're actually using this. This is crazy. And so I've documented all 17 into like an ebook that you can check out. But I've also got some like free bonus trainings about charisma, your merch table psychology, and a whole bunch of other things. Click the link in the description if that's something that's interesting to you. Also hit the subscribe button, notification button, all that kind of good YouTube-y stuff. And if you'd like some one-on-one help in your music business, there's also some links in there to join our free group. Go check all that good stuff out, and I look forward to seeing you in another video inside of Musicians Ignite. Take care.